I love the music and the readings that we chose this morning. And this morning I decided I'm going to share, as I mentioned last week, sort of just some stories and some quick thoughts and some surprises maybe for today, for this celebration. And then we'll do some more singing in a little bit. But I thought about this idea of Christmas being a little bit more than all the rush. And of course, we know the Grinch Stole Christmas. We're so familiar with that theme, even as DeAndrea mentioned that this morning. So I'm going to start off with something a little bit, I've done this before. It's been a while since I've done this, though, so a little bit non-traditional for Christmas time. This is a sort of a mashup of the nativity scene and a white over middle-aged guy doing a rap. So we'll call it, and some of you are looking at me like really sternly. So we'll call it the Christmas rap. Let's see. I only have one band member in here I can see right now. I might need the band to help me keep the rhythm here, but okay. All right, so it's up to Brad and Mike. Okay, here we go. Okay, here we go. Well, once upon a time, a long time ago, there was a baby born in Bethlehem. He was born on the stable, right on the table. Wise men came, they came to visit him, brought him gold and frankincense and myrrh, and said the boy would be a king. Well, meanwhile, Mary smiled and let him hold the child, because she knew what he would bring. She knew what he had done, and I forgot the rest of the words. So Mary just smiled, let him hold the child, and she didn't say anything, because she knew just who he was, and she knew just what he'd bring. Meanwhile, there were shepherds abiding in the field. They were keeping a watch on the flock. When they looked to the sky, their heads began to reel. When they saw what they saw, they got quite a shock. Was 1,000 angels up in the sky, 1,000 angels saying hi-de-hi, hi-de-hi-de, hi-de-hi, sing hi-de-hi-de-ho. That's your part. Hi-de-hi-de, hi-de-hi, sing hi-de-hi-de-ho. And then they said, peace on earth, goodwill towards men. If you don't believe it, gonna sing it again. Peace on earth, goodwill towards men. There's a baby born in Bethlehem. Hi-de, 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 hi, sing hi-de, hi-de, ho. But just then I'll say, well, the shepherds went down into the town. With light, the little stable was filled. The drummer boy was there, and so was Santa Claus, and everything was quiet and still. Just then the party started, 'cause didn't you know it was the very first Christmas day? Well, the drummer hit the drum, piper hit the pipe, and everybody began to swing and sway, jamming a jive to Jesus coming in time. On the chorus, they looked up to the angels, said, sing hallelujah for us. They said, hi-de, 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 hi, hi-de, hi-de, ho. Don't be shy. Hi-de, 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 hi, hi-de, hi-de, ho. Everybody, peace on earth, goodwill towards men. If you don't believe, we're going to sing it again. Peace on earth, goodwill towards men. There's a baby born in Bethlehem. Hi-de, 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 hi, hi-de, hi-de, ho. Now listen, they gave each other presents. Santa got some too. Ever since that day, he tries to give them away, so I hope he gives some presents to you. So, with that theme, and kind of with a little bit of the unusual nature, I told you all about this. By the way, Ed Stivender was the originator of that rap, and then I kind of met Ed years ago, and we played around with it and adapted a little bit for the Baron. I shared a few months ago that I have an office full of stuff. And some of these things have been important over the years. But Christmas time is notoriously famous for regifting. So you're going to get to partake a little bit in my regifting experience. So I got a few things in here because I need to clear off a shelf in my office, and so I'm going to do a few things here. And I'm just looking for somebody who has been fascinated with the comparison of the Gospels lined up, wants to see how the Gospels all line up. They're just fascinated with this, that they are different, that they are in fact similar, but there are parallels and differences. Somebody who's really into academic study and looking for that sort of thing. I'm thinking Mary Ellen may already have this one. Somebody else looking for this. It's not surprising that this one wouldn't be popular. It's not surprising. Yeah. Wait. Yes, Lori, of course. This is an eye-opener. Yeah, and Lori, what's really interesting about synopsis of the four Gospels is it has all my notes in there, so you can see where I suddenly discovered something. Yeah, it's amazing. Now what I need is somebody who typically finds themselves in arguments all the time. And this would be good for you. Hang on just a second. I'm gonna give this to the lawyer back here, and then hang on a second, because I got something for you I think that you'll appreciate. But Ann, this is called an illustrated book of bad arguments.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. Straw man, circular reasoning, all those good things that we fall into. Who finds themselves this season in desire of really wanting to read? I mean, just bury yourself in a book for hours and hours and hours, and yet you're looking for, you look for these ways in which things come together in the end. In surprising ways, everything's solved in the end. Not like a romance, but like all of life comes together in the end. Who's interested in that kind of, oh, Ryan, you're going to love this. This is the epic Indian Ramayana. That'll keep you busy for weeks. The cool thing about the Ramayana is in the end, the Monkey King kidnaps Shiva and Sita. I mean, kidnaps Sita, and Shiva and the Monkey King end up in this long battle, and you don't understand the Hindu epic. But I didn't either. And one day, years ago, I bought these two amazing Hindu puppets. These are big stick puppets. They're about this big, and they're sitting in my office still. I bought the Monkey King, and I bought the Prince, because I had no idea what they were. And there was this princess, and I thought, I don't need a romance story. I don't tell romance stories when I travel to schools. I need sort of good and evil. So I left the princess behind. It should have been a set. So I shared this with a friend of mine who is a Hindu scholar at the University of Oklahoma City, in Oklahoma City. And he said to me, he said, it's perfect. He said, it's perfect. You won't find it now. You'll go back and you'll never find that other puppet. It's not there. But the whole point of the Ramayana is that once Sita is found, everything is restored. So right now we're still in that place of, seeking restoration. But it's a good, read it. It's really interesting. Okay, who is in love with Alaska, the cold, the poet Robert Service, and just loves adventure? So back here in the back, yes. Okay, so this is a first edition of The Cremation of Sam McGee. A fascinating it's an interesting adult story, but that one's written for children, although it is kind of difficult because the guy dies, he's frozen, and he comes back to life in the end, and it's a long, interesting story. Okay. Who finds themselves at this time of year particularly frustrated with things and is rather negative about it, rather finds life difficult at the time of Christmas? Come on, be honest, somebody in here. Okay. This is the negativity scene. I've had it in my office for a number of years, but this will make you laugh for hours. Even Jesus is frowning. Okay, I have just one more silly thing here, and this is anybody in here? This is a long shot. Anybody in here a fan of Banksy? Yes, a fan of Banksy. Okay, I bought this in Germany, but it's a guy from California. But I bought it when I was in Berlin, and it's called Alphabet City. And the guy was supposedly good friends with Banksy, but I don't know. It's just that if you look him up, he says he was good friends with Banksy. And what he did was he went and he drew pictures, he drew graffiti, and in the form of an alphabet. So every day he would surprise the community in San Francisco, in this part of San Francisco, by drawing an animal or a picture that represented the next letter. And of course, with graffiti, it was always gone within a few days. And so he'd come back and he would put something else up. And so people began to look for this. It was a great sort of story of epiphany in a lot of ways. So perfect for the season. Alphabet City, there you go. Enjoy. All right. So that's it. Oh, I almost forgot. Anne, these two little figures go together with the arguments.
Oh, thank you.
You can just kind of imagine them. Okay. So a quick little thought here, because I just wanted to share some stories and some ideas with you. Years ago, when I was with my kids and we went to North Park Mall, how are we doing on time here? I'll make sure that band has time and we have time to sing. Good. Okay. So years ago when I was at North Park Mall with my kids, and my older son at the time was about 7 years old, and my youngest son was an infant at that point, Linda and I went to North Park Mall. Now, if you've gone to North Park Mall over the years, there used to be, in the middle of the mall, there's a tower. This is over in Dallas. There was a tower that they would put up, and Scrooge would be in the tower. And it used to be a feature every year for the holiday season. Scrooge would be there, and he would have performances in the morning and in the afternoon, in the morning or the early evening. And kids would gather, just hundreds of kids and their parents and whatnot would gather in the middle, and he'd come out there and he'd harass them, right? Because that's what Scrooge does. He harasses people, right? So I was there with our son, our older son, the 7-year-old Tim, and we decided that we ought to go out there and just sit out in the crowd and have some fun. I have a history with puppets. Some of you know this. Like clowns, they scare me. And there's a reason for that, because when I was 6 years old, my mother took me to Six Flags for a birthday party, and there was a puppeteer that used to travel around in a wagon, and he hid behind the screen of the wagon, and his animal friends would come out, and they would harass the children. Sometimes they would tease them, but sometimes they'd get a little bit, a little pushy, a little pushing the envelope a little bit. And I was there in a rather timid place in my life because of conflicts in the family and such, and we'd moved after a divorce from San Antonio. So we went to this birthday party, and the snake that was on the stage pinpointed me out of the crowd and noticed how awkward I was feeling and decided to highlight it. And so he began to tease me. And after just a few moments of being teased, I just fell into tears and ran screaming to my mother and have hated puppets ever since. Clowns are just by virtue of association, they kind of fit right in there too. But so here I am years and years later with my own kid, and we're sitting out here, and we're watching Scrooge as he comes out of the tower. And he looks out in the crowd, and he's harassing and teasing and joking and such, and then he stops dead on me. I'm right in the middle of hundreds of people, and he looks right at me down in the crowd, and he says, "Excuse me, sir, did your mother forget to dress you today?" And I was wearing khakis and a bland shirt of some sort, and I kind of smiled and started laughing. And he said, "Clearly you didn't look in a mirror before you stepped outside." And he continued to harass me, at which point my son, Tim, was looking up like, "Dad, are you okay with that?" And I was laughing hysterically, and I looked over at Linda, who was off to the side of the crowd, and she was laughing hysterically, and then he moved on. After it was all over with, I got up and I went over to say something to the puppeteer, just out of fun. Dallas Morning News was there, and the reporter had noticed how much I was laughing at being harassed in public. She said, "You really have a good spirit about these things." And I said, "No, I have a history with these things." I said, "I've been attacked by puppets most of my life." And the guy came out and was laughing. He was an older guy, probably in his 50s at the time, and I was in my early 40s at the time, or late 30s actually. And he was kind of laughing, and I said, she said, "Really? You mean puppets always?" And I said, "Well, you don't get it." I said, "Years and years ago when I was a kid, this kind of thing happened to me and almost changed my whole life if it hadn't been for some therapy and stuff." I said, I was harassed by this snake at Six Flags, and so my wife and I are just laughing that here it is repeating history. And the puppeteer, looked at me and said, "Oh my God, that was me." So it ended up in the paper as an interesting story in the Dallas Morning News. But it's interesting how these things have repetition, right? We talk about this all the time, about how serendipitous moments happen. Sometimes, though, serendipitous moments happen in negative ways because we're still living out of those patterns. We're still living out of that mindset. We're having trouble letting go. And it's the same thing at Christmas time, at holiday times, at Christmas time especially. There is so much idyllic and wishful thinking that happens at Christmas that leads us astray. I mean, it doesn't help to see Hallmark movies, all that just running 24/7. But even Mary Poppins right now that's out, and we went and watched it, and we love Mary Poppins. But even Mary Poppins, all of these stories, we love a good resolution. We love things coming together. In reality, things remain broken all the time. In reality, we remain broken in so many ways. How do we find joy in the midst of that brokenness? It's one thing to find happiness because we can create happiness. My wife reminds me all the time, and I had to remember that even when I was in that situation with Scrooge. We create our happiness by how we choose to see things. But joy is something else. Joy is something that we experience, I think, when we let go of those expectations, when we let go of those anticipations or those narratives or those egos that say things have to be a certain way. When we can let go of those things, when we literally can practice just saying the opposite, even if we have to. I don't need that. I don't want that. If we can do that, I think we begin to get towards that path where we begin to discover the joy that is at the ground of our very being, the joy that is a part of our life. So I have this wonderful phrase that I learned from a guy named Mike Lunig, a wonderful poet. If you ever get to read any of his stuff, I recommend it. Mike Lunig. He's called Story People is where his publications come out of. So he has this little poem I'm going to close with, and it's called Jomo. Oh, the joy of missing out when the world begins to shout and rush towards that shiny thing. The latest bit of mental bling, trying to have it, see it, do it. You simply know you won't go through it. The anxious clamoring and need, this restless, hungry thing that I have to feed. Instead, you feel the loveliness, the pleasure of your emptiness. You spurn the treasure on the shelf in favor of your peaceful self, without regret, without a doubt. Oh, the joy of missing out.